Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today. Welcome to filmandtvreview.com. Catch the latest film, TV and streamed show reviews every week. The views and opinions expressed by the authors and those providing comments are theirs alone. They do not reflect the views, opinions or position of filmandtvreview.com or their respective parent companies or affiliates. Filmandtvreview.com makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this program and is for entertainment purposes only. Episodes may contain adult humor and language. For full terms and conditions, see filmandtvreview.com.
Hello there, and welcome to a film and TV reviews interview special. I'm joined today, my guest today is artist John Mullaney. He's been involved in some of cinema's most recognisable creations, and brought to life in depicting them as extraordinary pieces, as cutaway paintings, and detailing some of cinema's most iconic hardware, starships, weapons, architecture, all across from film and TV land and gaming. He's worked with collaborations with publications involved with Lucasfilm, 20th Century Fox, and Games Workshop, amongst others. And fans of the Alien franchise, Star Wars, and even Halo gaming will recognise some of his pieces instantly. He's fresh from his exhibition at the Troubadour in London, and we seem to be next in at the Sci-Fi Festival, and also at the Prop Store's two forthcoming auctions this year of movie memorabilia here in LA, and an auction in September and in London. John, you've over 25 years, I think, you've built a portfolio, from what I gather talking to you, of original paintings. You started in a background in architecture, but how did you then transition into such otherworldly arenas? And I'm guessing you must have had a love of sci-fi and fantasy growing up.
Absolutely, yeah. I grew up with sci-fi, so it's sort of been deep in my DNA from an early age. It might be a surprise to learn that we didn't actually have a TV in the house, but my parents used to have a bookshop, and above the bookshop was a flat where my grandmother used to live, and then they held on to the flat after she passed, and so we actually used to go out to watch TV. Which is such a funny concept looking back on it. But yeah, one of the things we do, I'd often be helping my dad work late, and afterwards the reward would be we'd have a takeout, and I think BBC Two used to run these seasons of classic sci-fi B movies. Day the Earth Stood Still, Robert Wise, Forbidden Planet. Classics like that. And my sort of love of science fiction started there. At the same time, I was very into space Lego. For any 70s and 80s kids out there will remember that. And then into the 80s, then started exploring sci-fi, cinema, and really getting to uh, um, fall in love with some of these classic movies, and yeah, particularly I guess Star Wars was the first one. I did remember seeing that in the cinema, or certainly Empire Strikes Back was one of the first films I saw in the cinema. Um, and then yeah, once I got into the 80s, the Alien franchise became a real big one for me, along with Terminator and Predator and um, you know RoboCop, all those classics from that era. So yeah, that's where my love of sci-fi uh, originated from. And then yeah, I was very lucky to be asked to produce an artwork for Dorling Kinsley for their incredible cross-section series for Star Wars. So yeah, that was in '99 that I got the call for that, and yeah, everything else flowed from there.
Um, Lucasfilm's creative executive and head of the franchise story group, Pablo Hidalgo, I think saw one of your pieces and called one of your pieces iconic, respect to the Star Wars cutaway. Can you walk us through the collaboration and approval process with Lucasfilm and DK and how notes and feedback flowed back and forth and influenced your artwork? And just to walk us through, how that came about and then what the process was.
Sure. Typically, the process is that DK will commission me to do the piece, and then we'll start the job with a by acquiring a digital model, typically of the asset. If it's a vehicle, certainly locations, a different ball game. That requires a much more sort of almost detective-like approach. But certainly with vehicles, yeah, they supply a digital model. I can then load that into my 3D modeling software and get it to the angle that I think will work best for a cutaway. And then I can basically render that, print it off, and then start just tracing it. So I've got the basic geometry. And then I can remove the original render, and then I'm working on tracing paper at this point, and then I can really get stuck into doing all the cutaways and figuring out the line work. And it's a lot of rubbing out, it's a lot of trial and error. Yeah, from there there are multiple approvals, lots of back and forth feedback from DK and from Lucasfilm and from Pablo. And ultimately we get that to a point where the artwork's signed off, and then I can enlarge it and transfer it onto watercolor paper at a bigger size, and then I can add more detail, and then again more approvals that gets signed off, and then inking and coloring and a little bit of Photoshop at the end, but not much. So yeah, it's a long process. It typically sort of takes around 5 months. It's a typical gestation period, but sometimes there's a ticking clock and a deadline, and so that sometimes requires some long working hours.
I mean, with your architectural drawing background, does it inform like when you're doing, like, say, a cutaway or like Jedi Temple or something, inform you what is the best angle to take? Because you, particularly in your pieces, they're kind of 3D cutaways, and it kind of like you can see living quarters inside. It is quite detailed when people look at these and delve into it. So, do you know what angles to take, or do you decide that, or are you a bit restricted what to do, or?
Yeah, I decide it where possible, because there have been instances where Lucasfilm just provided a render, and sometimes what looks like a cool view of a ship isn't necessarily the best viewpoint for a cutaway, because you need to have an even perspective. So you want to make sure that the sort of the perspective at the front of a ship isn't sort of twice the size of the other end of the ship. So you kind of you want to get an even sense of perspective. so yeah, it's great that Lucasfilm share the actual model, because that just gives me the freedom to apply the experience I have, knowing which angle is going to work best.
With like so commissions with that, I'm guessing like you do a lot of film rewatches, the model because you're translating it from details. I mean, do you lose stuff maybe when you're doing from a 2D screen to 3D cutaway? But I guess with the models, gives you you can put a lot in there, I'm guessing. But do you have to sacrifice stuff because in your final piece? Or...
Yeah, there's sometimes you have to make sort of tough decisions. You have to, just the angle will not allow you to show two things in the same view. It's rare though. I mean, I think there's a real creative, um, that's part of the art of doing cutaways, is knowing how to um, maintain a ratio between what's cut away and what's not. If you cut away too much, then you start to lose the sort of overall geometry of the ship. And there's a definite visual grammar to how to do the cutaways. You can't just slice a ship open willy-nilly. You've got to sort of there's a way of making the cutaway make sense, so that it's, because they can be confusing if you get it wrong. They're not going to be readable or as readable. So yeah, and the good thing about having a digital model as well is you can you can rotate and have a look underneath the area that you're cutting away, because that then informs what you show when you cut the ship open. You've got to understand the geometry all around, not just the bit that you're looking at. So yeah, that's the approach.
Is there any kind of room for like a bit of spontaneously where maybe those dark areas what maybe are not so highlighted in or fully realized in model work because it might not be even uh, available depending on the
Uh,
property? Does it allow?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the models typically only show the exterior, and if there's a cockpit, they'll have modeled the interior of that area to not a high detail um, 3D model geometry, but enough to understand that space. But then you've got to sort of try and fit in the reference. You've got to work in what you see in the, if we're talking about the Hallcraft, for instance, from Andor, there's you've got an interior curved corridor, and you've got another series of rooms off that. So then that's why it's quite nice to, once the render's been printed off and I've traced off that on tracing paper, and then I can take the render away, and then it just comes down to drawing. And it's interesting. I think I mentioned Lego earlier, and actually I think Lego really helped my understanding of 3D space. I think it's such an amazing tool for sort of connecting those synapses when you're young, and enabling an understanding of 3D space. So yeah, it's there's that in play. And yeah, my architectural background means that I know how to make the perspective sit correctly, and there's, again, there are rules to follow, but if you know the rules, you know how to break them a little bit. Sometimes you need to do that in the instance of where some vehicles have a TARDIS-like quality, like the APC from Aliens, for instance, which famously the set was much bigger on the inside than the vehicle was on the outside. So you can, if you understand how to cheat the geometry, and you're working with traditional materials as well, it's much easier to cheat geometry sometimes than it is if you're building a 3D model where you've got to, everything's got to be there's less room for cheating, as it were. Yeah.
I mean, you've tackled franchises from Alien, Star Wars, Firefly, Serenity, and Halo, and they've all got quite distinctive looks. So, I mean, and your final renders are actually, I mean, surprisingly, they're actually in watercolors. And so, how does your process differ when approaching maybe like you're trying to depict the gritty realism of like Aliens versus maybe a more grand epic scale of Star Wars? Do you have any, I mean, it would involve like layering techniques, I suppose, but do you try and reflect the cinematic lighting or mood at all? Is that
Absolutely. Yeah, that's vital. Yeah, I mean, you want the piece to be evocative, and you basically want to look at the piece and think, oh, I want to watch that film again or that series again. So yeah, as much as it's about getting the geometry right and the content, the lighting is critical because these franchises are so cinematic in the truest meaning of the word. They're spectacular, and the lighting is a huge part of the spectacle. So yeah, imbuing the artwork with mood and ambience, that is critical, and it's my favorite part of the job, really, because it takes a lot of time to get the artwork to a point where it can be colored, but then once the color stage starts, that's where you can really, yeah, it's where it comes alive, and you can make. I think that's one of the reasons I love doing the work is I love it's essentially an illusion. You're taking a 2D piece of paper and you're creating something that looks three-dimensional and real, and has that sort of sense of verisimilitude. So yeah, I really love the color process. It's my favorite part.
does that come like in the like Photoshop elements at the end, like you're putting like maybe slime or grime with that, or do you inform that? I mean, where at stage of that go? Because it is probably vital to giving it its little distinctive styles according to the property.
Yeah. I mean, I try and achieve as much of the color work as possible on the paper. I just I think the finish you get with paint with watercolor, which is the process is one way. It's not just that bit of the ship needs to be grey. To make that grey, you've got to apply multiple washes to it and layer it. If anyone listening is familiar with Photoshop, it's like layers with different levels of translucency. So you're basically layering color, and you can achieve a real complex depth of color and tone with that process. And yeah, it's really exciting when it comes to life.
Mm. I mean, your cutaways often like reveal quite intricate inner workings, like say the colonial marines or whaling new tiny crafts. How do you balance? There is a point maybe you must balance like fictional engineering plausibility with cinematic design, and is there a point where your internal logic you think, oh, where does this go? This doesn't. Is it? Are there any kind of points where, oh, how to resolve those kind of things? Because there are bits that obviously can't make any sense to you, and
Yeah. I mean, I think the adage of form follows function is definitely a key part of the process of figuring out, right, well, that's what that bit of the ship looks on the outside. So what might be going on immediately beneath that? And yeah, I think it's definitely it's definitely one of the most challenging parts. Actually, is figuring out how to make something. It's got to look. You've got to show that connection between exterior and interior, but it's also got to look believable and real world, and it's got to look cool. There's no point doing making something look real world if it looks dull. It's got to look exciting. So yeah, I mean, I'm always telling my boys who draw, always work from real world reference. So in the case of the Hallcraft there from Andor, I always describe it as it's like the Bond car of the Star Wars universe, with all its gadgets. And essentially, it's a high performance sports car. So for the engine element, I literally Googled, high performance sports car under the bonnet, and just if you take this, such incredible design just tucked away, hidden from view most of the time under the bonnet. People, incredibly talented, designers and engineers have come up with these, already done the hard part for me sometimes, and it's just a case of stitching together, elements that I think will fulfill that brief of, let's make it look believable, let's make it fit within the exterior form, and let's make it look cool.
You actually had a chance encounter with an ILM animator, I think Josh Thornhill, whose work kind of intersected directly with yours, and you're both working from both ends, I suppose. And how important is like for cross-disciplinary dialogue between sci-fi world building, especially in these iconic vehicles or architecture? Uh, do you get any cross collaborations at all? Does that even, or are you so removed in time from
Yeah, it
projects
was
that
it
don't
was very
intersect?
it was so cool to meet Josh, because normally our worlds just do not meet. We're just completely different ends of the production line. He's I mean, that came about because my friend Ram, I invited him along to the opening weekend of the exhibition. He said, "Can I bring a friend?" I said, "Of course you can bring a friend." Little did I know that the friend was Josh, who turned out to be senior animator at ILM, and he had no idea that my artwork of the ship that he animated even existed, let alone that it'd be part of the exhibition that he'd be coming to. So it was a real chance encounter, but pretty much the first time that's ever happened in 25 years. Normally we just Josh's and colleagues are involved in the creation of these incredible sequences, and these designs, and then the film or the show will come out, and then I'll be commissioned, and then it's a case of sort of deconstructing the work that has already been done. But it was great to meet Josh, and I was able to say to him, because I was such a fan of that sequence. I'm sure your listeners will know, be familiar with it from the first series of Andor. I think the episode's called Daughter of Ferrex, and it's one of the most exciting pieces of Star Wars, if not most exciting pieces of science fiction action. And I was able to ask Josh all the thoughts that had been racing through my mind while I was doing the piece, and like the when those countermeasures, the part of the ship kicks up at the back, and I was able to say to him, "Were you referencing the DeLorean there? Because it looks so much like the back of the DeLorean." He's like, "No." It's just total chance that it looked like that. But they're very unusual to meet, the actual animators and the people creating these incredible designs. So real privilege.
And I mean, when like working with these designs, is there any creative license that an artist could have? I mean, or is there quite a strict adherence to maybe the vehicles or even stuff that will like feature in forthcoming story material? Because when they're making films and so forth. How strict are your guidelines? Like, say, maybe you've done something and then they'll say, no, you can't show that, or that's wrong. Or is that in that kind of process, you come across that a lot? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are times when you'll spot something in the show, so you'll then work it into the design, and then the feedback will say, "We don't want to show that," or we might be changing that in a subsequent series. So you've got to keep an eye on the time setting of any given, certainly with locations. So I did one of my recent pieces was Navarro from The Mandalorian, and that really evolves over the 3 series. It's almost a different place entirely. So in the case of that one, the brief was right. We want it set during the 3rd season, but it then still had to show elements from the 1st season, like the lava river. There's so much time is spent on it with these jobs. It's not all about the painting and the drawing. There's so much email correspondence that goes into working out the content of these pieces.
I mean, having worked with like 20th Century Fox, Games Workshop, and all the other studios, I mean, do they have different expectations or workflows? How do they differ between major studios and maybe tabletop gaming publishers? Is there a bit more latitude with uh, expectations or workflows or timings, or how does that say someone working in the industry? How does that, what's
Yeah, I mean, I think
experience?
Lucasfilm definitely they have this sort of the the most sort of hands-on approach, and they're very involved, and there's every approval is thoroughly checked. Other franchises less so, and there's a bit more latitude. Certainly with uh, Alien, that's been true. I think the publishers that I've worked with have been happy to defer to my. They know what a fanboy I am, so they know that I'm going to make sure that the detail is all correct. And there's a bit more freedom sometimes, but yeah, I think that's the thing. Is ultimately I'm my own fiercest critic. If I know that it's not right, then it's not good enough. So I'll if where I'm given the latitude, then I'll make sure that it's 100% accurate as far as I can make it. It's not always easy if the reference isn't available. It's just there's no way of knowing for sure what a particular detail is. Then there's room for artistic license and just doing the best possible job with the reference that's available.
I mean, you've also worked on quite large, different scales, sort of depending on the vehicle. But say with Halo, for example, you're dealing with huge warships, and what challenges do that present? I assume you got a bit more creative freedom with when you've got so much vast areas to flesh out, because you have worked on
Yeah,
warships, I think, with Halo in the book and the.
yes, that's right. Yeah. I was uh, very I was delighted to get the call from Hans Jensen, who is one of the original Star Wars cutaway illustrators, and a very along with Richard Chasemore, and I very much modelled my own style by studying their work, really, intensively. And Hans dropped me an email to say he'd been invited to do this project with Rich, but Rich was busy on a job, so would I like to collaborate with him on it? So he did. I of course said yes, and Hans was doing the human-built ships, and I was doing the Covenant alien ships, and yeah, worked with 343 Industry in Egmont with a publisher, and yeah, 343 were they were brilliant, very hands-on in steering the what they wanted to see. Sometimes certain ships like Ardent Prayer were much easier, really, because one, it was at a discernible human scale, and the content was, the interior content that was going to be revealed by the cutaways was all gameplay. So these were all sets that existed, digital sets, of course. Whereas something like High Charity, that thing is, I believe, from the top of my head, 350 kilometers wide. And the scale just becomes so abstract that it's kind of that's much more challenging, and especially so when 343 themselves weren't really sure what that interior looked like. There are little bits of it, but at that scale, it's that was the first time that they had ever explored what that interior would look like. So yeah, that was definitely a very time consuming piece to get right, especially as I'm not really a gamer, and wasn't familiar with Halo. So that, unlike most of the other franchises that I've worked on, where I've got a real encyclopedic sort of fanboy knowledge of these franchises like Star Wars and Alien and Serenity. With Halo and Games Workshop, those are definitely franchises where I need to be steered a little bit by the owners of the IP.
I guess that those are the biggest kind of vehicles to be depict I guess in your career, but um, no one's ever asked you to do like maybe a Death Star cutaway yet, or
Well, I already beaten to it with that one by Hans and Rich. I think both have done that. I think there's at least 2 Death Star cutaways. So yeah, but there are definitely um, you know ships and locations out there that I'd love to do that haven't been done yet. So yeah, watch this
any-
space.
anything you might have your eye on, or franchise that you would like maybe to.
Yeah, well, I mean, so
uh,
far, like I say, Alien is that's the franchise I'm most passionate about, and today I've only had the opportunity to do 2 cutaways from that world, which I did the dropship 20 years ago now, and then the APC about 10 years ago. So it's definitely time for another one, and I think certainly the ones that would be great to do would be the Narcissus. That's quite that's a nice scale. You could really get a lot of recognizable detail in that. And then the big daddy of them all would be for me the Sulaco, and that would be a real passion project because that thing is big, and I'd need to work at a really big scale. I've always been limited by A1, just because that's the standard paper size. But actually, there's nothing to stop me from, getting paper that's sort of 2.5 meters long, and to really accommodate the length and the scale of that ship. So yeah, I'm hoping to try and make that happen.
Do you ever get to like embed any Easter eggs, like nodding to maybe lesser known parts of an expanded universe with your creations, like stuff that's been featured in comics and novels? Or do you get to put them in or little details in that you hope maybe fans will spot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was, I think, one of my favourite aspects of doing the Serenity Firefly cutaways, which I did back in 2008 to 2011. It was a 3-year project, about 6 different artworks, 2 main cutaways of the main ship itself, and certainly in one of those pieces, which is has been on display at the Building Bigger Worlds exhibition that you mentioned at the Troubadour, and is going to be at the Sci-Fi Festival. That is that has just got Easter eggs everywhere, because there's all the episodes of Firefly have all these little details like Kaylee's dress or Jane's gun. Vera actually watched that episode last night with my family. Stands up so well, and yeah, those little details are what fans want to see. It's what I want to see as a fan. Again, I'm being my own fiercest critic, and yeah, I'm when I'm coming up with these artworks, I'm coming at it from a fan's point of view and saying, right, what do I want to see? And so yeah, it's a real fun part of the job is putting in those Easter eggs, and that's why the ships that have a recognizable human scale like Serenity are so much fun to do, because I think when you can recognize props and costumes that you see in the show, and details that you can relate to from a human point of view, then I think they can be the most satisfying details to include.
Your exhibition did feature, I did notice, like a time-lapse films with your paintings in progress. It's a great way of presenting like the work for social media platforms. How did that idea come about? Because I haven't seen that really often.
That was when I got the job to do the ships for the book, the Alien book, the Weyland-Yutani report. That was so I was commissioned in 2013, I think I started at the beginning of 2014. It was very intensive 6 months of my life where I had to produce, I think it was like 8 or 9 artworks, one of which was a cutaway, and they're very time consuming, especially inside of 6 months. So naturally I thought, well, I'm going to make this job even more complicated than it already is. And I'm going to use it as an opportunity to film myself creating them. So yeah, got all the kit I needed, figured out a way of a workflow of doing it. Essentially, it's a time lapse animation. It's a series of stills stitched together to create, a video. So yeah, just one of the most creatively fulfilling experiences of my life, because at the end of it, I had, finished the job, finished the actual artworks, and then I had all this material on a hard drive, and then it was a question of making a film out of it. And the film became APC Cutaway, which was so focused on the one cutaway artwork from the artworks that I was commissioned to do. And so yeah, I've always dabbled in, up at that point I'd done a lot of filmmaking at school and at university, but it'd been a while since I'd got to flex that muscle again. So yeah, got to grips with the editing, and it was also an opportunity to apply my musical ability to the project. Basically created the soundtrack with my band, Last Picture Show, and yeah, it was a really creatively exciting time, because I was bringing together everything I can do, basically, bringing the art, obviously, but then the filmmaking aspect and the music, and it all came together. Yeah, very proud of that piece. And then took me some time to then get around to working with all the time-lapse imagery for the other pieces, but eventually released those, and that's available online. The film's called Alien 8 time-lapse. So yeah, really enjoy doing those. Very time-consuming, but yeah, very gratifying. And I think a lot of people really enjoy watching them as well.
Yeah, that's great. Making behind the scenes of actually this work in progress, because they're so intricate. But yeah, I mean, you've also worked as we've done a kind of video. You did an award-winning, well, I say award-winning filmmaker because you won what, best music video at the
That's
Hollywood
right.
Art and Movie Awards for your
Yeah, I know.
band, actually. That's something you want to explore more in the future, like more filmmaking or that kind of avenues, if you got time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that is my, as much as I'm looking for new, cutaway artwork avenues, the filmmaking is the other string to my career that I'm looking to further. I've been developing a short film concept. Well, I've got a feature film written, and so I'm currently figuring out the proof of concept short for that. Yeah, just recently have started to put together an idea that I've always been, when you're a low budget filmmaker, you've got to think within the limitations of budgetary restrictions. But it's an interesting time for filmmakers, because and I know if some people will immediately sort of wince maybe at the thought, but AI is a really exciting tool for filmmakers with small budget, because suddenly, the kind of visual spectacle that you can see in your head, which is out of reach for filmmakers without a budget, suddenly becomes a little bit more achievable. So yeah, if anyone is listening who is experienced in AI video creation, I'd be interested to hear from them and possibly collaborate, because I think it's definitely a way. Although ultimately, I wouldn't want to, create film just in AI. That's definitely not an end goal. But as a means to an end, as a way to enable the next big exciting creative leap in film, I think AI could definitely play a part. But it's not like you just say, well, I want to see this, we put that in as the prompt, and then out comes your film. It's obviously far more complex than that. So yeah, definitely looking to try and find collaborators who have the experience and know how to do these, how to use the technology.
Yeah, great. Your work is quite deep rooted in hand rendered techniques. It's waterproof ink, architectural draftsmanship, and research and the rendering of each piece. I guess AI tools begin to permeate even professional illustration spaces. So, do you ever consider AI as part of your current workflow with layout drafts, palette testing, or 3D
Ye-
references? Or do you think it could
Yeah,
dilute the core of your practice? Because yours is quite unique. It's quite unique. It's like seeing something so tangible and hand-drawn elements to it.
yeah. I mean, I've definitely in the last couple of years, when I've started a job, I've always, out of curiosity, just put in given the prompt to an AI image generator to see if it could get me anywhere near the sort of thing that I do. And I don't know if I'm using the wrong AI engine at the moment, but I have not been convinced that my job is under threat. It fundamentally doesn't understand the complexity and nuance that certainly the cutaway artwork requires. It can create something that looks very exciting initially, and then once you properly scrutinize the detail, it falls apart. There's just a fundamental lack of understanding of scale. And not to mention the achieving the aesthetic of a given subject matter. And then yeah, the detail is just not there. But it's definitely it can be a useful tool, and I've used it. It's an amazing tool for coming up with concept art. Quickly, within just a few hours of first using it, I figured out how to create something that ordinarily, if I been building something in using 3D modeling and rendering and texturing and lighting, something it would have taken weeks. Certainly with somebody, I'm not the world's, I've never claimed to be an amazing 3D modeler, but I think even an experienced 3D modeler would agree that actually you can get for quick results, certainly to create something like concept art. Yeah, AI imaging is an amazing tool, and again, I think the use of AI is it's whether you're doing imaging or whether you're doing whether you're writing, it can often really break the back of something for you and get you sort of 80, maybe 85% of the way there, but that final 20-15% human editing and involvement is crucial. If you can't just use AI alone, it's got to be always with human creativity as a key part of it, certainly at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, you get quite a lot of visitors, and you probably will do in the future, of looking at your painting. What's been their firm favourites, or what are the kind of comments that have struck with you that they've made to you? Because they get to meet you there. You're quite generous with your time with your visitors and the fans there. Do you any great feedback that you like seeing, or they've commented and you've really stuck with you?
I mean, it's absolutely. I mean, it was so. I've been when people ask me how was the exhibition, well, I will tell them exhausting. It was a lot of work, a lot of travel, and so many things to think about. But the most life affirming part of the experience was meeting and is meeting all the fantastically interesting and kind and generous people that have come along to the exhibition. And I made a point of trying to get a photo with everyone who came, yourself included, with Noel. And certainly the feedback I got from everyone was, well, I don't think there was any clear winner. I think everybody responded to particular artworks. I know the power loader and the Nostromo certainly got a lot of attention. The Palpatine's quarters from Star Wars, that a lot of interest in that one. Certainly, it was very timely actually that the exhibition featured that artwork, as well as the Hallcraft from Andor, because both very timely for Star Wars, obviously with Revenge of the Siths 20-year anniversary and the new season of Andor. So both of those got a lot of attention, and then it was really lovely to meet people who are into Serenity, Firefly, because it's definitely at the moment its sort of popularity has waned. I would say it's not really quite as doesn't have this sort of footprint in pop culture that it had certainly 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. But these things are cyclical, and I'm sure that'll come around again. But in the meantime, so lovely to meet people who really respond to the detail of pieces of that piece, the Serenity cutaway piece that formed part of the exhibition, and really lovely to meet Halo fans as well, including Ram, who I mentioned earlier. And yeah, like I say, that franchise is one that I don't know as well. So it was lovely to meet people who looked at the two artworks there from Halo, and the fans that came to see those pieces really responded to them. Those ships and locations really meant something to them personally, in the same way that the power loader it does to me. So that was absolutely hands down the most gratifying aspect of the exhibition. I'm a real I love meeting people. It's just such a privilege to find out about their lives and about their backstory with all these franchises and how they've shaped their personalities.
Lastly, any favorite pieces of yours that you particularly proud of or really have a fondness for or loved working on the most?
I mean, definitely all those the pieces that were commissioned for the Weyland-Yutani report. Really loved doing those, and actually the most recent pieces that I've done for Alien Romulus. Initially, so those were commissioned by Free League publisher, who produced the Alien RPG, and they approached me 6 years ago, and that's they commissioned 6 pieces. And initially when I got the call, the email, they said, we want some ships, and I thought great. And then they said, we just want them to be 2D. And I was initially a little disappointed, because I love working in full 3-dimensional art. But actually, once I got working on them, it's surprising just how much depth you can create, even in an elevation view, because when you combine color work with shadow and just the unusual geometry of some of the designs, you actually can still achieve a huge amount of 3-dimensional depth. And working on the Corbelan and the pulse rifle from Romulus was equally gratifying. Yeah, really enjoyed doing those.
Well, thank you, John. I mean, those looking forward to those exhibits, that are forthcoming ones, and those who value maybe owning some of those traditional art pieces and get those collector-based feels for some of the most iconic shapes as we just mentioned. Come, I think, visit. You got the prop store exhibition
Yeah,
coming
so
in the
so
year.
the pieces. I'm not sure when this goes out, but the Sci-Fi London Film Festival are exhibiting the same pieces that were up in the Troubadour Gallery. So there's 13 original artworks on display in the members bar of the Picture House, Finsbury Park. So that's from the 19th to the 22nd of June, and that'll be the last chance to see that particular collection of pieces, because then on the Tuesday, I'm driving half of those pieces up to Prop Store, who I'm sure your listeners will be aware, one of the world's most premium entertainment memorabilia auction sites. And yeah, those guys came along to the exhibition and really loved the artwork, and are going to be selling seven pieces at the LA auction, which I believe is on September the 10th, and then their London auction on another 7 pieces at their London auction on December the 2nd, I believe. It's all online, so yeah, that's going to be an opportunity for people to own these pieces. And yeah, I should stress that the way that licensing works means that and it's a frustration in some ways, because a lot of people who came to the exhibition were asking, well, can I buy prints? And the disappointing answer is, I'm afraid not, because the way licensing works is that they can only be reproduced in the books. That's what they're commissioned for. And then I retain ownership of the originals to sell, but I can't produce prints of them. So yeah, if you love these franchises and you love paintings as opposed to entirely digital art, paintings of this sort of subject matter are quite unusual, and I'm told by collectors increasingly rare. So this is the only way really to own the artwork is to own an original. So yeah, people can either bid for those. I think it's a total of 14 pieces, which will include some new pieces that haven't been exhibited so far. They'll be available on those dates, and then in the meantime, the other pieces are all available from me personally. People can have a look at those on my website, which is johnrmullaney.com. JOHNRMULLANEY. So yeah, very open to people getting in touch if they're interested in buying original art. And these pieces, I think one of the other appeals of the original art is over how they appear in books, apart from the fact you don't have the gutter of the book interrupting the artwork halfway along, is just the scale. I always work at like I mentioned earlier, typically at A1 size, so they're big, and you lose a sense of that sort of visual impact when they're reduced in a book. So it's this is a great opportunity for people to see what these original artworks look like in person.
Yeah, in fact, they look absolutely stunning and quite beautiful pieces of work. You do get quite involved in. It's almost like the storytelling. It's almost just takes you straight in there. They are beautiful pieces, and so do catch them before they disappear, or at least have a look at them before on those exhibition dates. John, thank you. It's absolutely a pleasure talking to you, and obviously, maybe listeners fanboying as I am a bit because. Get to relive those really iconic bits of work and beautiful pieces of rendering.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Really love chatting with you.
No problem. Thank you, John. And for you at home, we'll see you next time. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this film and TV review.com episode. Catch the latest film and TV reviews, together with regular episode content from the world of film and TV every week. See you soon. Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today.